Welcome to the self-healing revolution where ancient wisdom and modern science meet. I am your host, Paige Pierman, owner of Love Yourself, an Ayurvedic and integrative wellness center based in Louisville, Kentucky, where I offer coaching, courses, and retreats. My purpose for the summit is that you'll learn to biohack your body, master your mind, and elevate your soul. Today, I'm so excited to introduce you to Susie Bower. She is a holistic wellness coach for women who want to discover how to tap into their body's incredible healing abilities, regain natural energy, and improve their sleep quality, all without the dependence on pharmaceuticals. Susie's refreshingly straightforward approach to awareness has made her a sought-after mentor, coach, and trainer for a wide variety of clients, from high-profile celebrities and fitness models to women who have lost themselves when becoming a mom. Her 20-plus year career began when she woke up from her first back surgery at the age of 20, knowing she had to make a change and would no longer allow her depression to consume her life any longer. Susie, thank you. I'm so glad that I stumbled upon you and that you're here joining me on the summit today.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
Yeah, so I have somewhat similar story to you. I have 3 spinal injuries and found myself in a very low grade place with chronic pain, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, leaky gut syndrome, nutritional deficiencies, anxiety, overwhelm, and myself, being a young mom, 2 small children, found myself completely depressed because I was I was no longer the version of my youthful, happy, free-loving, fun-spirited self. And I was like, who am I? And the chronic pain was putting me in a place of, for the first time in my life, feeling depressed, which was not my true nature. And so your story actually resonates with me, and I want to hear about it.
So to start off, I was in my 20s. So when I woke up on the couch and my back just kind of hurt, wasn't really thinking much of it. And my friend was a chiropractor. So I went in to see him and he was like, well, all I can do is an x-ray. He ended up sending me to a neurologist, and I'm in my 20s. I'm in a room full of people who are in their 80s and 90s. I didn't feel like I should be there. That was the first thing that kind of threw me for a loop at that age. And then when the neurologist took my MRI and he came in the room and he was like, I don't have any good news for you. You're going to have back surgery. We're going to try to prolong it as much as we can. They were doing I had pain meds. They were doing cortisone steroid shots in my back, and those got more frequent, and those were so painful. But at the time, that's just what I wanted. I was scared of back surgery. I didn't want to have it. So I was doing whatever they told me because they're the experts, right? So I thought they know what they're doing. And I was like, let's just do it. We'll have surgery. So I had the surgery, and he had told me after he saw my MRI the first time that he's concerned with another disc that was right below it. And if I didn't change my lifestyle, then I was definitely going to be back on this table in 3 to 5 years. So when I woke up, and it took me almost 3 days to be able to get out of the bed and walk, because I had a huge back surgery at the time. That one was a laminectomy. And while I was recovering from that was when I was really like, you know what, I have to make a change in my life. At that time, I was in my 20s. I was drinking a lot, staying up, eating fast food, doing all the things that you shouldn't do to the body. And then that's when I just decided I'm not doing this anymore. And I started looking into health and fitness and what I could do. I remembered at the time, massage was very helpful for me. So that's really kind of how I got into this. Is I started as a massage therapist and then eventually became a personal trainer and a yoga instructor. So it was just each one of them kind of built into themselves. And for a long time, I didn't have any issues with my back or any pain, probably for about 20 years. And then it finally hit me again. And that's when I had my second back surgery. So I would say that's kind of a win, changing my whole lifestyle and making it go from a 3 to 5 year gonna have surgery to 20 years later, I had surgery. But through that, my depression had started when I was 16. Right after I turned 17, I moved out of my house. I graduated high school early and moved about 400 miles away from my parents. And that was a big shock for me. I was an only child. So I got really depressed at that time and was off on and off different kinds of medicine. They couldn't figure out what they wanted to give me because it just wasn't working. And then after my second back surgery, COVID happened right after that. So I went from being able to teach my classes and having that social interaction with people to being completely cut off. My physical fitness, I had to obviously stop because I couldn't work out after I had surgery. So it was just everything that was so normal in my life that was keeping my depression kind of at bay all came back. And it was the depressive spiral that I've never had before. It was the worst thing I'd ever been through. One day I just decided, you know what, like I need to share this with someone. It had gotten to the point I made a video on YouTube, and the only purpose of the video was to show my hair, because at that time I was going through a cycle where if I wasn't working out, I didn't think I was dirty. If I didn't think I was dirty, I didn't need to shower. Like those were the things that I was telling myself. And it would be like 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time before I'd washed my hair or done anything, because I knew it was going to be in a huge knot. And I knew how long it was going to take to brush out. I still have 2 herniated discs in my neck. They don't give me trouble anymore, but at the time they did. So brushing my hair for an hour, I couldn't do that. So I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And finally, I started to get back into journaling and writing down. And I started to notice the triggers that I had and everything that was leading up to that. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm just going to make this video. I cannot be the only one that's doing this. And after I made that video, still to this day, and that was almost 2 years ago, I made that video, I still have women reaching out to me either by commenting on the video or messaging me saying like, oh my gosh, I'm going through that same thing. I thought I was the only one. And at that time, I was a little too scared to really talk about depression. I didn't think, I'm not an expert in this, but I have 20 years of living with it. And a lot of the clients, which was funny, I never paid attention to this before. A lot of the clients I was kind of attracting were following in the same footsteps as me. So I was able to help them. So I kind of opened my eyes and realized, okay, maybe I do need to talk about this stuff. Maybe I do need to share more about it. So my business, after we moved from Italy to Bahrain, my business changed, and that's the direction that I'm going now.
Yeah, I resonate with your story so much. I came up against very similar incidences where they were giving me pain meds, and I was having epidurals, which was messing up my hormonal cycles. And I came to this moment or awareness that wasn't the way out, that I would be stuck indefinitely in medication, epidurals, and like this downward spiral. And the only way out was, for me, similar to you, started doing yoga, and I couldn't, at the time that it happened for me, I just resonate with your story so much. At the time that it happened for me, I couldn't even load the dishwasher anymore. Like you were talking about washing hair. Like I just stood there and I was like, I'm in chronic pain just loading the dishwasher. And I was trying to get laundry into the dryer one day. And I'm like, I can't even do basic normal tasks without like being down on my knees in pain. And so what I like about your story is that if you stay in that trajectory is like pharmaceutical drugs and surgery and epidurals, like that's really all there is available to you. You can do physical therapy, but that's not going to get you through, basic functional movement, meditation, breath work, any of these things. But like, I believe it's really important because for people to heal, like this is a self-healing revolution, right? If somebody comes, like a clinician or a practitioner, and says, oh, just do this, but there's no empathy or having walked in your shoes, they can't understand the nuances it's gonna take, right? Like you're helping guide women through a process that you went through. But if a clinician or a practitioner is just like, oh, do this, but they have no understanding of the nuances, then it's hard to help walk somebody through how to get out of that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. That was almost my story as far as going through therapists with depression. I don't knock therapy at all. It works for some people. It did not work for me. And that's another area that women come to me and they're like, it didn't work for me. And I tried probably about 6 different therapists in the matter of like 5 years. And I wasn't comfortable. And I know it's a me problem. I wasn't comfortable opening up to these people because I just didn't feel like they were either one, listening to me, or two, understood. They know book stuff. They don't know what I was going through. And I think exactly what you're saying. If you haven't walked in those shoes, it's really hard to guide someone else through that. And in my case, like, I'm not trying to be a doctor by any means, but when you've been in those footsteps, in those shoes, you know what it feels like. It takes you back to that moment. And then you start to dig after you've overcome these things, and you know how to help people through that. And I think that's really important for, a coach to have those skills being there, instead of just knowing what it says to do in a book, because that's not going to help everybody.
Exactly. So understand this. Like, I've had people come to my practice who are in pain and suffering of any kind. It could be, it could be from sports. It could be, there's many different ways that people come to suffering. But when I sit and I deeply listen to them, they feel seen and heard sometimes for the first time. Like, I remember being in that pain and almost silencing myself because I'm like, no one's going to understand me. And it wasn't just a victim mindset. It's like, no, people really, truly don't understand the pain loop and how difficult it is to get out of the pain loop. And so I just kept silencing myself. And the more I silenced myself, the more I suffered. And like you were saying, this is the next part I think is really good to get into. I put on a mask. Just as you said, I put on a mask to the public, and everybody thought that I was high functioning, but in my world, I was crashing. And I completely understand that. So I wanted people to see that I was okay. So the more I put on a mask more and more, because it was like I really wanted to hide the depths of my despair. And so people, when I finally came out and said, like, I'm crashing, everybody's like, my best friends were like, I had no idea. You never said anything. My closest friends and family, even, my husband at the time, they really didn't know the depths of my suffering.
Yes. And I don't think it's as moms, I know we really do this because we're trying to be strong for our kids. And that was an awareness that after my second back surgery, it was very eye-opening for me, because most of the trauma and everything I had been through happened before we had kids. Our oldest one is 11 years old. So she's been through about half of this with me. And our youngest he's 7 now. But for the longest time in the very beginning, I didn't want anyone to know. My husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, he had no idea I was depressed. He didn't know I was taking all these medicines. He didn't know I was going to therapy. He had no clue. And that's because I didn't want to show people I was suffering. I didn't want to burden them with anything. And at that time,
you don't want to burden anybody, because especially if you're used to taking care of everything,
yes,
you see yourself as a burden if you were to let anyone truly know what's going on.
Yeah. And I think my biggest struggle too was I was an only child. So I was used to having to deal with everything myself. And I had to get it done because there was no one else for me once I went off to college. Like, this is who took care of me, this person. So it's wearing that mask. But then when you bring the whole parenting thing into it, you don't want your kids to see you suffering. You don't want them to see you upset, because then they get upset and then they ask questions. And that's probably one of the worst, is when they ask the questions and you're in that moment. It's really hard to answer those questions. And then you get really upset and you get irritable and angry. And that's part of the stuff that I deal with most of the clients that I have is in the high functioning depression, is that they don't understand why they're getting so angry and so irritable. And a lot of this is because their emotions they have suppressed for so long and worn that mask for so long. They don't even know what it's supposed to feel like to be normal anymore.
Right. And I think the other part, at least I can say for my story, is there was a level of type A personality where I had a level of perfectionism that people knew me as a straight A student. I was a runner. I was very academic. I was like high performing. And so, this level of perfectionism like kept me from letting anyone see that there were cracks, like, because everybody was always like, you're so high functioning, like you're so like exactly what you're saying, that to let people know that that isn't true, or that you're not really that, is like a letdown. You feel like you're letting yourself down, as well as, like you're saying, letting your children down, because as a mom, like it's part of your essence or being to be there for them, to be like the strongest source of love, nurturance, and connection. But then you're giving energetically constantly to your children, and then it's like there's nothing left for you.
Yeah.
So that was part of what I think too, is that I think maybe the women that have, I'm not sure, I don't know the answer, but I feel like maybe the women that get to this place are the ones that are holding it all together for their children, for their families, for their work, and running that like high functioning level, but not able to keep it the consistency up anymore because the body needs attention.
Yes. And I mean, rest is a huge thing that it's underestimated. People don't talk about it. When you hear people going on their, health journeys, they don't talk about rest. They don't talk about their stress management. And that's really where my career started, was sleep and stress management, because people think fitness, they think nutrition, they think that's it. That's not it. And when you can get that rest, if you don't let your body rest and listen to when it's telling you, hey, we need to slow down, it's going to stop you. It will do something. Something will manifest, a disease, a back surgery. It will tell you it's time to stop. So it's really important to listen to your body.
Absolutely, because I remember, again, I just resonate. Your story is like so resonating with all the ones I've heard so far, because I remember I was with a Ayurvedic mentor, and I was only getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep at night because I was up nursing and I was up like taking care of changing diapers, and I had 2 young children at home. So I had a baby and a 2-year-old. And so I was getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night and still trying to work full time while trying to be a mom with kids at home. It was crazy. And I remember being on a call with an Ayurvedic mentor, and she was like, Paige, you have permission to sleep. Because I had chronic insomnia. And I was like, I never had anyone say that to me. And I remember I just broke down in tears because I was so utterly exhausted. And it took 3 years of me like putting them to bed around, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and falling asleep and sleeping 12 and 13 hours for almost 3 years to catch up on the literally lack of sleep, that deficiency that was happening within my own body. And I believe, as I know you do, is that sleep is one of the fastest like anti-aging, restorative, repair things that we
Yes.
can possibly do.
Yes, absolutely. But no one talks about that. So that's the problem I think we have as a society, is no one talks about how important sleep actually is. They'll just throw around, oh, well, you need to get 8 hours of sleep, but don't tell people why they need to get those 8 hours of sleep. And I think that's really crucial. And summits like this are what bring awareness and bring attention to it. And that's why they're so important to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm hoping with this, is that people will be like, oh, yeah, I hear that. And it's like hitting me, just like the mentor who said to me, and I broke down in tears. Like, I hope that they'll hear the message that they need to hear that will take them to the next step.
Yeah.
So talk more about the mental health. What, um, so this, we talked about this high functioning, talk about like what's experienced a little bit more, like in terms of what that looks like, how it can be identified, how somebody could even see that in themselves, that they might not even be, just as maybe you were like even seeing, oh, wow, this is what's happening. That
Yeah.
kind of aha moment of, wait a minute, maybe, I think it's a hard thing to admit, like I'm depressed is a really hard thing to even admit to yourself.
Yeah. And that's why I tend to break it down, because high functioning depression, that's not even a clinical term. Most therapists won't even acknowledge it as a thing. They do have persistent depressive disorder, and they acknowledge that that is a clinical term. So the two kind of get confused a little bit. But with the high functioning depression, it's stuff that we do all the time. It's that little, always being irritable, like not understanding why little things set you off. Like your kid does one small thing, or your spouse or somebody does something super small. It's not that issue that they did, it's everything else that's built up inside. But it's also the things that you like to do. And it's very similar to the symptoms that you have with depression. And that's almost why I guess people don't want to admit it, because, well, in a way, people see depression as, well, you have to be like so sad and crying in bed. You can't get out of bed. You can't function. You can't do those things. You have suicidal thoughts. That's what they think depression is. So when you actually pull back the veil on it and be like, no, actually, there is a less severe, I guess is a good way to describe it, which is the high functioning depression, where you have poor appetites. You're either not wanting to eat, or you can have an increased appetite on the other end of the spectrum where you're overeating. And there's other issues that go behind that. And with all of these things that I'm about to talk about, it's really so many other things it could relate to. So people try to say, oh, well, it's probably this, because they don't want to admit that it could potentially be depression because there's such a stigma behind it. Being tearful or frequently crying, that's one that people do tend to relate to. With that, another one, when we were talking about sleep, is you're either excessively sleeping, but then when you wake up, like say you're sleeping over 10 hours, but you wake up and you still feel tired. That is definitely a big sign of it. A lot of the negative self-talk that we have in our head, people don't recognize that. But when you actually sit down and listen to the thoughts that you're saying, if it's not something that you would say to your kid or your mom or your sister, those are things you need to be aware of, because if you're saying that to yourself, why is that fair to say to yourself, but you wouldn't say it to another woman? Those are huge ones. And I mean, I had those issues for a long time, and it takes work. And I think people also, not that they don't want to do the work, but maybe when it's so constant in their head, they don't even realize it until something brings their attention to it. Like, whoa, do I really think that? You know, and I always ask my clients, when you have those thoughts in your head, first question to ask, is it true?
Yep.
Most of the time you can easily be like, nope, not true at all. Okay, well, if it's not true, then let's start to deconstruct those things that are going on in your head. But other things that you can look at and see is maybe you're not as productive in your work or in, you know, your home life or anything that you're doing. Your relationships are starting to decrease, your either activities with those people or wanting to be involved with the things that they're doing. You just kind of pull back a little bit. Or the other hard part about this is you go the other end of the spectrum and you try to stay busy all the time. And this is one that a lot of people don't realize can actually be a high functioning depression symptom, because
Because
you
I
don't
think
want
part of that is
what's
that if you actually slow down, you have to feel what you don't want to feel.
yes.
Like, I
And
think
they
that
don't,
was what's happening in my scenario. It's like, if I keep this going, then I don't even have to sit with what's actually happening.
and people are so uncomfortable sitting with themselves. So they cram in and stay busy all the time. So if you're one of those people who you're constantly trying to fill your schedule with something going on every single minute of every single day, you need to take a look at that and realize, why am I trying to cram so much stuff in my day? What do I not want to be dealing with right now? And that's a question when you start to ask people that they really dig into that. It's uncomfortable. It's ugly. They don't like that feeling. But if you can keep going deeper and deeper into that, that's where the magic starts to happen, because that's when you start to realize, okay, I am trying to stay so busy so I don't have to deal with this.
Mhm. You said a couple of things that resonate, at least with my story, which was appetite. Like, I was the busy, right? Like, keeping myself so busy from feeling what was happening, that I had gotten down, like I was 5'8", got down to like 107 pounds at one point, or 105. And people thought that I was like anorexic. Like, some of my friends were like, people are worried. You look like you're, I was like, no, like, I'm not anorexic at all. There was just a lack of appetite, that I was just coming down to like bones at the time, you know. And it wasn't at all lack of appetite. I mean, it wasn't at all like trying to control my food. It was literally like, even the pain, like being in a state of pain, I didn't want to eat, you know. So it was like a vicious cycle at the time, you know. So like you said, pay attention. Are you excessively eating to numb yourself, or are you not eating because you're in pain and you're busy and you're avoiding, you know, the uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you work with women, you have these high functioning versions of depression, and then like also people that are truly depressed as well, or you come across
Yes.
that?
And I mean, that's the thing. I'm not a doctor, so I tell them there's no shame in getting help. A lot of people don't want to get help. And that's kind of a little bit of the issue with the high functioning depression, is a lot of people will think, oh, well, you know, I'm not so bad, I don't need to get help. And that's the first thing that I tell them, is there is no shame of getting help, because everyone needs help. Like, even coaches have coaches. We all have.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with it. And they might have to do like I did, and experiment with a few different, you know, doctors to see how it's going to work. And there's also no shame in medication. But I think, and I truly believe this after working with so many people 2 decades now, is there is a point, I believe, that if you can get to it and you can really dig into the awareness of your body, you don't need to rely on external things like coping mechanisms of alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, shopping, all of those things. You don't need to deal with that, and you don't need to be put on medicine. I think the medicine, and I can speak personally for this and as well as for my clients, a lot of times when you go on the medications that they give you, they're going to cause a slew of side effects that then you're going to have other medications to fix. And that's a vicious cycle that you get in. And no one ever talks about, well, when the doctor puts you on that medicine, what's the plan to get me off this medicine?
That's so important. I want to talk about that too, because I was put, I went to the doctor and I was on like pain meds and I was going and getting epidurals. And at one point, my doctor was like, Paige, I think, because I didn't want to admit I was depressed. I was like, do you have, oh yeah, I have high anxiety. And she was like, well, I want to put you on an antidepressant. Even though I didn't admit I was depressed, I was like, I'm just in pain. I'm not depressed, even though my life was crashing. So she put me on an antidepressant and I was only on it for a month. I was saved by the fact that an aunt from my ex-husband had come over and she came on our couch and she said, I've been on this medication for several years. It happened to be on the one that I was on. And she said, every time I try to get off of this medication, it's like going into DTs. Like she said, she's like, I literally suffer. I need to stay on your couch for about a week to 2 weeks while I wean myself off this medication. I watched her for about a week and a half look like she was dying on my couch. And I was on the same medication for just a month, when it really would have started to kick in. And I was like, that's it. I'm not doing this. If that means that I'm going to look like her one day trying to get off this medication, I watched her moan and groan and toss and turn and sweat and cry. I literally watched this woman look like she was in a torture chamber trying to wean herself off this antidepressant. And I was like, okay, that's it. Like, this is a message that I don't need to be on this drug. And exactly what you said, not even the pharmaceutical, like antidepressants, but just like gabapentin or things for pain, you can't even have a bowel movement, or like your peristalsis completely shuts down. So you're building up toxicity in your body and like your elimination patterns are messed up. You name it, there's a whole host of side effects that they don't really explain to you. Oh, when you get on this, you're going to become dependent upon it. And then your body's going to need more and more and more. And you become more and more dependent, but you still haven't got to the root cause of your issue and you're suffering. So you're just masking the symptoms, and you're really not dealing, like you said, like asking those deeper questions, or how do you talk to yourself, or what are your thoughts like? That's not getting to the heart of the matter.
Yes, absolutely. I got a little excited when you said gabapentin. I had only been put on that right before my second back surgery. It was for nerves, right? To help that. And when he put me on that, we had taken a trip to New Zealand, and my heart rate is really low. I'm super fit. I work out every day. And like my normal resting heart rate's in the high 40s, low 50s, and blood pressure also fairly low. And I'm a nerd. I like data. So I take my blood pressure every morning when I wake up before I even get out of bed. And I noticed after about 2 weeks of being on gabapentin, it was like 140 over like 87 or something, which is way high for me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
doctor, and I'm like, dude, this isn't normal. He's like, well, that's still normal. I'm like, it's not normal for me. And that's what they do. Everything is a blanket. This is normal, but no one is treated like an individual. And that's where I have a huge problem with Western medicine is you have to treat the individual and their issues and everything else. Like, I'm not normal according to normal. I'm on the very low end of it. And that's why he was like, oh, just keep taking it. I'm like, dude, my heart feels like it's going to pop out of my chest. Like, this is not okay. So I stopped taking it. And I know you're not supposed to do that with depression medicine, but I did the same thing with that. I just cold turkey stopped taking it. I didn't like the way that I was feeling. I was so numb to every feeling in the whole planet that I was just like a zombie sitting there. And I'm like, this is not okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the similar situation, I went in to get an epidural and I came home and I bled for 30 days straight. And I was like, in fact, I actually had amenorrhea all through high school and college because I ran cross country and I didn't have a period. So for me to bleed like 30 days was the complete opposite of the spectrum of what my body had ever done before. And so when I went back to the doctor and I said, look, like, this isn't normal. This has to have happened from the epidural. And he was like, no, it has, all the research shows it has nothing to do with like your hormones. It's not affecting your hormones at all. Well, I dug like you, I'm a nerd. So I got online and found some studies that were done by the National Institute of Health. And it like 1% of the population, I happen to be that 1%, it affected their hormones. So I went to my OBGYN and I said, look, is this affecting my hormones? She's like, absolutely. So one specialist, who's like, like a pain specialist, is saying it has nothing to do with your hormones. But then I went to another specialist and she was like, it has everything to do with your hormones. Like, absolutely, you're in that 1%. But I think too, like they don't, if you like, there's a general idea what happens with the general population, but there's always side effects. There's always a certain percentage of the population that's going to have side effects. That's why when you get a drug, it has the whole list of everything that's going to be a side effect. And you could be that small percentage of people that get that side effect, but that doesn't really get spoken of until the side effects come up. And a lot of times they're not even recorded. Like, like when they're doing the trials and the research, are recording that. But once it's out in the masses in the public, they're not seeing the people that are like, oh, I had a side effect and I quit the drug, or I had the side effect, and, intuitively know. I have so many people come into my practice and they're like, I believe, or I have a sense, they have an intuition. But then when they go to their doctor, they're not validated. So they want to believe the white coat, like, well, the white coat doesn't. And it's like, but I feel, and I'm like, well, you need to listen to yourself. You're an advocate for your own health. And, so yeah, I mean, it's not what I talk about this in the summit, like for acute based care, if you need a surgery, Western medicine can take care of you. But for getting to the underlying deep rooted symptoms, the doctor might spend 5 or 10 minutes with you. They're not going to get to the rooted places, whether it be physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological, nutritional, like all those things. They're not trained practitioners for that. They're trained to give you pharmaceutical surgery and whatever, and it serves its place. But when you're wanting a long-term strategy, there's other ways.
Yeah. I mean, with my pain meds after my back surgery, after 2 C-sections, I didn't want to take the pain meds after I left the hospital. So I was on it for like 1 or 2 days, maybe. And the doctor was like, well, I'm still going to write it for you. And I said, it's kind of pointless. Like, I'm not going to take it because I want to feel what my body is telling me. Like, I had my implants taken out. So for the last 4 surgeries I've had, basically, I stopped pain meds right after I got out of the hospital because I didn't, for me, and I know most people aren't going to be like me, but for me, I want to feel what my body is telling me. And then I want to do what it tells me I need to do. If I take pain meds, I know from my past history, from my first back surgery, I'm not going to feel what's actually happening in my body. And I'm going to think I'm okay. And I'm going to do things that I'm not supposed to be doing. So I know if I don't take those pain meds, I will feel what's going on. And I won't do the things that I think that I can do and try to be super mom and do everything else. And it all goes back to that resting thing too. If you let the body rest, it heals a lot faster.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, so true. Like, like you, I was born with scoliosis, I have bone spurs, I have L4, L5, I have stenosis and C4, C5. I live without pain, but it does flare up. And when it flares up, I'm like, okay, how was I sitting ergonomically? Did I work out? Am I drinking enough water? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I doing my breath work? I go through my checklist and I'm like, if I'm not, okay, I have a toolbox and I'm like, bring in the tools and the pain goes away. It's like, you can slide out of that. It's very easy in a stress-based life, or like you're trying to manage your world, to kind of slide away from the center. It's like, okay, if that's happening, okay, go through the checklist. Like, what am I not doing right now that's
exactly
is to emerge?
Yes.
And it can also be like just psychological. Like, am I triggered by something? Is that why this pain body's coming back again?
And that's one of my biggest indicators when I know my sleep is starting to compromise my health. Is my back and my neck are my number one indicators. After about 2 to 3 straight days of really bad sleep, and I'm talking like 4 hours of sleep where, yeah, I can function, but I'm not getting that deep REM sleep. I'm not nothing is good out of the sleep that I'm getting, my back will start hurting or my shoulder and neck start hurting. And I don't typically have any back pain or neck pain when I'm taking care of myself. So when those things start happening, it's just like you're saying, I go through my checklist of, well, what was I doing yesterday? What did I do? And I can start to see the trends. And that's one of the biggest things I tell people. And at first it might be kind of annoying to do this, but it really brings that sense of body awareness in, is write down. I have a journal and I write down anything. If I'm feeling a sinus pressure in the right side of my face, like I'll write that down, because you can go back and you can look and see the trends as they're starting to appear. So then you can say, oh, okay, maybe I need to address this, or maybe I need to look at that. But a lot of times people don't have that body awareness. And that's why I think summits like this are so important, because people start to hear about, oh, well, I do this and I do this. They just push that symptom down, or they just push that pain down that they're having. Oh, well, I'm just getting old. So it's normal. It's not normal. Pain is not normal. And that is the biggest thing that I tell people is pain is not normal. That's body talking to you. Listen.
You know, I have a quick story I want to share how important this is. I was working in my 20s before I had hit my crisis, you could say my health crisis. And I was working with this woman, and she was so bubbly and happy. And every day I saw her, she's like jumping for joy and like smiling. And I remember one day I went home and I was like, it's almost extreme. Like I've never seen somebody act so like overly smiling and overly happy. Almost, I was like, not that it seemed, what is the word I'm going to say? Insincere, but I was like, it didn't feel natural to me. It turns out like a couple years later, she committed suicide and no one saw it coming. And so that's exactly what you're saying. Like it can be so masked. No one would have thought. They're like, oh, she was like the happiest person, but she was just, oh, it was becoming excessive because she was hiding so much, you know.
Yeah.
It was like deeply hidden, like exactly what you're saying. She suppressed it so well that no one could see it coming. And so it's so, like you said, it's this awareness, this education. Like there could be one of those women out there that are hearing this and like, oh my gosh, that's me, you know. And she was very active, all the things that we're saying. And
Right. Yeah, exactly what you're saying right there. And when a lot of people, I hope, because obviously there was a new celebrity suicide death that came about very recently. But when things like that happen and it gets put into the media and into the public eye, it's only because it's a celebrity that people are being told about it or being made aware of it. And the thing is every time I hear a story of, well, they committed suicide, but you would have never thought that there was anything wrong with them. And to me, I'm like, no, I would have, because it's almost the strongest people, the happiest people, the people that always try to make others laugh and help others be comfortable.
a lot of comedians do.
To watch out for. Yes.
And that's exactly why this is so important, because it's like the comedians, like you said, the people that you would least expect it. In fact, I was thinking about her and I thought about another woman that committed suicide. She was a successful real estate agent. She was gorgeous. Like she looked amazing on the outside. She worked out. She did, you know, a lot of the things that make you look good on the physical level. But she was actually, she was on some antidepressants, and mixed that with some drugs and alcohol one night. And that was like the mixing of the drugs and the alcohol with the antidepressants, like put her brain, I think, in haywire, and she committed suicide. So, you know, like you said, it can be very, very well hidden in society. Yeah. So yeah, we talk about that, but like even for the people that are ultra depressed, I think that's where, and I should be cautious in really saying this, but they may initially like need pharmaceuticals just to get them through the edge. But I really wish that mental health would help people find a long-term strategy for, okay, let's see if we can bring in all these other things other than just relying on the medication. Because I do believe that there are people that are on the edge of suicide, that they just need some level of time to get them back out, like get them out of that zone that they're in. But then like all these other strategies need to come into play.
Yeah, because no one talks about the breath work, and no one, I mean, I know it's a cycle with the sleep and everything, but no one, when I was going through all of that at 17, no one was talking to me about, well, how was your sleep? How are you eating? I was eating fast food. I'm like, when you fill your body with junk, you're not going to feel good. And then you're not getting sleep on top of that. So you're not recovering. And then you're putting poison like alcohol in it. You're not going to recover well. Like, it's just, no one talks about any of that. And I really hope with things like this and, you know, people like me and you, there is this awareness that is brought to, just to make people at least question or at least think about some of the things and some of the actions that they're doing, because nothing happens right in the moment. It's a slow buildup throughout their life. And that's what causes it. If everything that they put into their body would happen immediately, like whatever the long-term effect was, would happen immediately, I think people would be more cautious about some of the things that they do and the choices that they make. But we can't do that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of someone too that I know that was bipolar. And just like you were saying with sleep, like we just started working. I mean, she had been suffering from teenage years, you know, for about 10 years, like in her 20s, but very young for this stuff to be happening, obviously. And we just started working with her circadian rhythm. And she has seen herself go from like in her lifetime, like, right, like starting with these symptoms maybe around 14 or 15, and over a 10-year period, nothing working, even pharmaceuticals, and literally just trying to work on her circadian rhythm. Like she's changing at lightning speed, you know?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's all. Like, I only say this because I know how it's affected me, what I was like when I was on pain meds and depression medicine. I know what it was like then, and I know what it's like now. And I know helping other people, when you're on all of those medicines, you're in a different mindset. But again, no one is addressing the issues and the root causes of anything. It's a Band-Aid. It's, let's just figure this out later or never figure it out. Like I said, there's no plan to ever get off those medicines. Like, no one ever says, okay, well, this is going to be the way that we're going to get off of it. And that's what I think is really important, is if we can just baby steps. Like, a lot of the people that I have dealt with, they don't even move their body because they don't feel like they can. Well, then when you add just a little, and I'm not talking big stuff, I'm not talking a workout plan, I'm talking just go walk around the block. That changes their physical and mental state. And it's easy stuff to do, and it's easy to say it, but you don't even have to walk that far. Walk 6 feet. Like, if you've never walked more than 3 feet in a day, walk, like, just do a little bit more than you've done the day before, and add that breath work. Like, breath work you can do anywhere. That's the best part about it. You don't have to have anything. It's already there. Everything you need is there. And that's, I think, for me, I think a lot of the treatments that we have for a lot of the illnesses that we have and a lot of the diseases that we have, it's all inside of us already. We just need to tap into that. And that's what we do.
Yeah. So true. I also think it's really important because we're talking about mental health, and I know you and I are on the same page with this. But a lot of people, whether they be social workers or psychiatrists or in the mental health field, they're not trained in understanding nutrition and the microbiome. And so I see this happen so often that people can be in therapy for years and years and years, whether it be talk therapy, they can even be doing trauma informed therapy, you know, some really good EMDR, some other things to work with what's going on in their emotional body. And however, 80 to 90% of our feel good hormones are in our gut. So if
Mhm.
you're only dealing with the trauma and you're only dealing with talk therapy, the minute that people begin to really work on their microbiome, just that, like 80 to 90% of your feel good hormones come not from here, but
Yep.
from here, your gut. So it's like, if our medical Western model could just start to be like, okay, yes, insurance will cover to see a nutritionist or an integrative functional doctor or an Ayurvedic practitioner, a nutritionist or a naturopath, like somebody who's actually skilled at helping restore the microbiome, that person may not need to be on the pharmaceutical drugs because they're not even producing the hormones that they need to be, because they don't have a healthy microbiome to begin with. And so they could be spending 10 years in therapy. And really, like, yes, I'm not underestimating I get it. It has its place and it's definitely needed. But wow, if all of a sudden they start producing serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and then they start to access those hormones that are going to help them feel good, then they won't need, they can start to bring the body online, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. And it's just like, I know we're going to shift. That's why I'm like, it's like, we have to make our waves, like, sadly, only so many people can pay out of pocket for this care. But there's a whole slew of people that don't have the resources outside of being covered by insurance or Medicare or Medicaid to have
Mhm.
access to what we do,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shift coming though. I do feel it.
I
Like
feel
over
it.
the past couple of years, things have shifted more in our direction. So I feel it's coming.
Yeah, I actually believe that, well, like, I'll give an example. During COVID in India, where there's a larger, denser population than the US, right? You've got millions of people living on top of one another. So the spread of a virus could move very quicker through a dense populated area versus like rural sprawl, right? So the minister of India was like, wait a minute, why don't we use this ancient wisdom of Ayurveda and actually put some money into it? Because we're in a global crisis here and we have a dense population. So why don't we start to put some money behind researching the immune system that Ayurveda has talked about for so long, right? And so they actually, for the first time, started putting money into the research. And even in the US, like, Ayurvedic schools are doing their own research because it's like, well, the pharmaceutical companies aren't going to do it. The government's not going to do it. So we have to start doing it. So it's like,
Mhm.
I think it really is like making waves. It's like on us to grassroots do this because it's not going to come top down.
Mhm. And that was the first thing that I did is got my Ayurvedic doctor in Bahrain right when I moved there because we didn't have one in Italy. So,
Yeah.
but now I have one.
Yeah. So tell me before we end about the work that you're doing and what you're offering and just educate people really on your work. And
So what I am doing now, I kind of, like I said earlier, I had a shift in my business of the direction that I was going. So I'm taking people through a group program and I'm purposely starting it mid-January because I know how people go into the new year with these great expectations of new year, new you. And I don't play into that. I don't agree with that. I think you should be taking care of yourself at all times, not just because it's January 1st. But I do know after 20 years of doing this with people, it's about the second to third week of January that people fall off. And then that's when they give up. And that's when I'm there to pick them back up and say, no, 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 this isn't how we're going to do this. We're going to do this the right way from here on out. So I do have a group program that I'm going to be starting through there where we do address all of the things, not just health and fitness in the mainstream terms of nutrition and actual fitness. We get deeper into root causes. We get deeper into listening to that negative self-talk. And it's a whole program based on that. It's a 6-month program that will be a group program that I'm going to do with that. But then I will also take people, because there are some people who do want to do one-on-one. They don't want to be in the group environment, or they want a little bit more time with me. So that program with the one-on-one is a little more tailored to exactly what they need. But with the group program, there is still access to me where we are going to have group calls and I can, deal with people as they need. Because that's the one thing that I really strive on with my groups is it's not cookie cutter. It is made for each individual person because I think that's how we all should be treated because we're not the same. We all have the same structures. So those things follow the same principles. But I think a lot of people, they fall for the cookie cutter stuff and then they wonder why things don't work for them. So that's one thing that I've always done is made it structured to that person, whatever we have to do. But yeah, so I have the group program that's going to be launching then. And then I also have the one-on-one that I continually do throughout the year. I typically only take about 5 to 7 people for that because I want those people to really get that one-on-one attention that they deserve when they come into that type of container. So that's
yeah,
how we work.
you said there's a cookie cutter approach that, like, I'll take, for example, just we were talking a lot about pharmaceutical drugs. A lot of the pharmaceutical drugs are studied on men.
Yep.
Because the reason they're not studying on women, so it's like, oh my gosh, like 50% of the population is taking these drugs, that they're only in the trials studying men. And the reason for that, that most people don't know, is because men don't have a menstrual cycle. So
Nope.
women are unpredictable because every 28 days, they're literally different hormonally. So they're not good for trial because, so then so it's like, this cookie cutter approach could be not only Western medicine, but also, like you're saying, like there's a cookie cutter approach to health and wellness as well. And I bring this up as an example over and over again. Like somebody well-meaning could give somebody a diet advice, but they're not looking at their genetics, their bioenergetic body. And so one well-meaning person could tell somebody to be vegan, and that person may be very catabolic in nature, and they need, there's some people that are anabolic, there's some people that are catabolic. We have ectomorphs, endomorphs and mesomorphs. So it's like people give well-meaning advice that's cookie cutter, but it doesn't always work for everyone. And so then people suffer because they think that that's the regimen that they're supposed to be following. And it's just not the case. So that, and it's like, and the sustainability that you were talking about, if people literally haven't made it their lifestyle, like you're talking about, then they're going to fall back into their old patterns and their old disease and their own, unless it's a lifestyle, like a long-term lifestyle, like you're talking about. It's not just you do it for a quarter of a year or you do it for several weeks. It literally, true transformation in health and wellness has to be a lifestyle.
Yes.
And truly, most people cannot do it on their own because they have no guide, they have no mentor. And frankly, I know you know this too. They don't have friends, families, and colleagues that are implementing it. They're surrounded in a stew pot of people that aren't doing it. So they have nowhere to feel supported.
Exactly. Yeah. No support. That's huge because when you don't have that support, then you allow those people to dictate what you're going to do with your life. You allow their opinions to change you and what you think you need to be doing. So I absolutely agree with that. I mean, even if they had all the information written down for them, if they don't have that support of somebody else who's either been there or somebody that knows how to cater to them, without that support, that's why they fail. And a lot of the cookie cutter stuff that sets them up for failure because they're following what works for somebody else, thinking it's going to work for them. And then when it doesn't work for them, they go through that repetitive cycle and they start to beat themselves up thinking, oh, well, it must be something that I did, but it's not what they did that was wrong, other than not following their own intuition and their own body.
Yeah. Yeah. And that intuition and your own body wisdom is just amazing because it's also, I think, for women trusting themselves. Like, because we are, like I said, we've been in a paradigm of Western medicine and the cookie cutter approach. Women, I think they're collectively coming into this like, okay, I'm beginning to trust my voice and trust my intuition. But we've been in a society that's very logical and linear thinking and very cookie cutter, and also like the white picket fence model. And so women have really silenced and suppressed and suffered and been afraid, I think, to truly come out in the open about their beliefs, their intuition, their own integrity because of the stew pot that they're in,
Yeah. Yes. A lot of this go through as pregnancies and, even just the sense of smell, how things are increased. And that's done if you start to think about it biologically. So we don't eat something that's bad for us, which is then bad for the baby. Like it's that simple intuition that women need to tune back into because it's there. We have it. We've just been told, shh, ignore it.
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, and it's not to say that the best of it, like I try to be super humble in my practice and say, like, even the best of us like fall prey to, I mean, in the best wisdom and lifestyle and inner knowingness, like we can all fall prey to this at times. And then it's like, how did I do that? Like, why did I do, like, a lot of times I'm like, how did that creep up on me, or just like creep in unknowingly, because I think it's like there's so much of the subconscious, uh,
Mhm.
conscious like parts of ourselves that we're not always fully aware of too, you know.
But I think, speaking on that really quick, I think when we as women especially get into being that self-aware, like how you were talking about going through the checklist and things like that, it's faster for us. So when we do start to fall down this slope, we catch ourselves even faster so we don't drop as far down the next time. And then, okay, yeah, it's going to happen again. I mean, that's life. We're no one's perfect. And I think that whole idea of perfectionism, it just needs to go away because no one's perfect. But as you fall, you get better and you learn faster. And that's the whole thing, as when, learning to listen to yourself and to trust yourself, like you're saying, is so huge in that, because a lot of times I think most of the clients that come to us, they're so far out of tune of what's going into their body and what's happening in their body. They don't even know what anything means when their body is trying to communicate to them. So I think when they become, and this is how I think it becomes more sustainable, is as you learn more about your body, then okay, well, if I do this, there is going to be this consequence. So you're aware, okay, is that a trade-off I'm willing to make? Is if I eat this or if I do this, it's going to feel like this the next day, or I'm going to have this sensation. Is it worth it to me? And then you start to build better practices through that. And that's what makes it sustainable, because everyone wants to feel good. No one wants to feel like, meh.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a Kundalini yogic teacher, and he said something that's always been really profound that I keep in my mind around the choices that I make. And he said, when we seek pleasure, we're often followed by the level at which we receive pleasure is followed by an equal level of pain. So I'll give an example. So like, let's say you have several drinks in an evening and you're like, I'm having fun in the moment. I'm out with my friends and, and this feels good. And I'm having this amazing time and I stay up late and, oh, that was amazing. And he says like, but it's followed by an equal level of pain. It's like the spectrum, whatever choices you make, you're going to get the equal and opposite effect of that choice.
Mhm.
But the distinction over pleasure is that we can, in this lifestyle, have a more pleasureful life. Because when you work out, when you meditate, when you breathe, when you eat properly, when we're doing all the things that we've talked about, sleeping well, your level of pleasure and vitality and joy is amplified. It's just a different kind of pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think people think, and I mention this because I think people think that they're sacrificing and they're
Yeah.
suffering and that that's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, I mean,
I
I've
have to
been,
give up and,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I think they're like, oh, but I have to give all this up.
Mm-hmm.
Or like I can't eat what I want. I eat. It's like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to be giving up all these things that are seemingly fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so that doesn't seem like something I want to do because that's a sacrifice. And it's like, no, actually, what you're saying is when you live this lifestyle, you crave it.
Yes.
You crave the level of pleasure that it gives you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because before, my whole party lifestyle in my 20s, and then after I found out I was pregnant with our daughter, I stopped drinking, because then I took that 9 months to really focus on, why am I drinking? And then I realized I'm a better person without alcohol, and I don't push that on anyone. I do, when it comes up in conversation with clients who have tried everything, I ask them about their alcohol consumption. And when they stop doing it for, say, 2 or 3 weeks, they feel the difference in their body. And I think that's huge for them, because that's one thing that people don't look at very often. And that's why when you brought up alcohol, that's what made me think of it, is a lot of times people don't think of alcohol and what it's doing to their body, and maybe how it's affecting their choices that they make. And for me, I can almost feel the same thing. Like, it's been almost 12 years now, 13 years that I've had alcohol, but I remember what it felt like. And now if I eat too much sugar, I feel hungover like that the next day. So
That's me too. It's because your body's not used to it.
yes. So, I
Mhm.
mean, it's that slight awareness of things that that's like my biggest goal in teaching people, is to have that feeling, to know like, okay, you're going to do it. What's it going to feel like tomorrow? And are you okay with that?
Mhm. And it's a compounded effect too. It compounds on itself. So it's like one time, like another Ayurvedic practitioner said, somebody asked her, and they were like, well, do you ever drink alcohol? And she gave a story and she was like, when someone lives a life that's more purified and clean, they have a level of ojas, and ojas in Ayurveda is, it means like on the physical level, your immune system, but on the subtle anatomy, it really means like your deep vitality, your strength, your stamina. And what she said is that when someone has really, really strong ojas, they can do something one time, say it's like one time, and it won't affect them.
Mm-hmm.
However, if they were to continue to do that day after day after day after day, it would have a compounding effect, and then their ojas would be depleted. And so what I think was really important about that is that, like, take, for example, travel. Like, I just left like one time zone into a different time zone. It's going to change my circadian rhythm. If I was messing back and forth with my circadian rhythm all the time, it would have a compounding effect. But if I just do it one time, every 6 months or 3 months, whatever, it's not going to shift my world to a huge degree. But I think what's happening for a lot of people is that they're in that compounded effect of day after day after day, week after week after week, month after month after month, or year after year after year. That's why they're functioning down here rather than up here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun connecting with you.
Yes. Our stories are very similar. That's
I
very
didn't know that until the call, but I so deeply resonate with your story, and love that you are really walking women through helping them with their mental health, and just this awareness piece, because people are so busy to even stop and think about what's happening to themselves.
Hmm. A lot of times they're too busy worrying about either what other people are thinking about them, or worrying about how to take care of somebody else and not themselves. Like, we do not, as a society, and especially as women, take care of ourselves as well as we should. So this, I hope, brings awareness to that.
Yeah, I think women have their blinders on, just trying to sustain and keep moving forward, that just stopping and being like, what's really happening here?
Yeah, it's okay to rest. It's okay to listen and tune in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. This has been a joy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. All right, I'm going to pause this now.